In this video, we're going to talk about Cleanspark, Iren or Iris Energy, and Bitcoin. And believe it or not, yesterday we actually saw inflows despite pulling back. BlackRock's IBIT draws in a $325 million inflow despite Bitcoin's pullback from its previous cycle top of 69,000. Yes, that's right. Over the weekend, we ran up all the way nearly to 70,000 before pulling back on Monday. Once the market opened, we started selling off. However, BlackRock, which is the largest of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, they brought in $329 million of inflows yesterday. The other funds didn't do as well because when you add up the 12 funds, they registered total net inflows of $294 million on Monday, but still a positive net inflow on a red day. Institutionals, Wall Street, they are buying Bitcoin. Whales are loading up. Whales know what to do here at this point in the timeline. As mentioned by Nate Gerasi, iShares has taken in $1.5 billion over the last 6 trading days. And that $1.5 billion alone would make it a top 5 launch of 2024 out of 570 ETFs. However, it's taken in a total of $23 billion since January. Are there still any naysayers out there? There are. Believe it or not. Fidelity's Bitcoin fund also posted an inflow that day on Monday, but the others posted outflows. But still, overall, like I said, we saw positive net inflows. Now, I did want to pull up Bitcoin, and we are noticing some bullish divergence on the 1 hour. And on Monday, we were looking at bearish divergence on the 4 hour, and then we saw a drop. We might be working on establishing support here at this descending resistance. Right now, I'm on the 4 hour, but I'll show you on the daily. But it does look like on the 4 hour, we're starting to break it, but a different story on the daily. Now, we did kind of bounce off this 66.7 area. If this breaks along with the descending trend, we're going to likely test 66. But see, on the 4 hour, we were starting to sell off a bit. You'll see that the price was going higher here. However, the RSI was starting to drop. We were starting to lose our momentum on the RSI, and that basically marked the top here. That 69,000 last cycle peak, this yellow line right here, is the last cycle peak. Bitcoin is so near to price discovery, near new prices we have never seen for Bitcoin. It is only a few percentage points away from breaking all-time high now. And I want to show you the bullish divergence on the hourly. You'll see that the RSI is starting to recover from oversold, starting to bounce, but the price is basically staying sideways here. I do think we are about to recover. I do think we are on our way to break all-time high. I think this can come by the end of this month. Bitcoin can easily do this. It could also decide to go down to 65,000 as well. In the end, no one really knows. We can only speculate. One thing I do know is over the long term, Bitcoin will make us very successful. If you follow the cycles, it's really hard to lose. But with this drop now, we are almost 10% away from all-time high. We were about 6% away before this little pullback here on Monday. Now, what's important to me is holding this descending trend, which so far so good. As long as we don't get a candle to close under this pattern, so far we are all right. Hopefully we get some recovery over the rest of this week and we can maintain this price. What comes soon after is going to be a flip of the 50 and 200 MA. That 50 MA is getting so close to that 200 MA. We will see this golden cross, and I do think this will be the final golden cross until we end this next bull run. Until we start getting into late 2025 into 2026, and then the big ugly death cross comes around. Now, I do want to talk about Cleanspark, then we'll touch on Iren. Cleanspark got awful close to that $13 gap. It looked like it was going to attempt to fill it, but then pulled back with Bitcoin. We have 2 gaps to look out for, actually 3, but one is very far away down in the 7s, and we got close to it, but did not hit it. Maybe this comes around next crypto winter. That would be my speculation. Now, we do have a gap in the 10s to be aware of, or under 10. We do have a gap right here at 13. And once we break this 13 resistance, I do think we'll fill this gap, and then we are going to continue heading higher as long as Bitcoin follows what it has done every Q4 of a halving year, and that is run like no other. Will Cleanspark get to new 52-week highs before the year ends? I don't know. Can we at least get to 20, test 20? I do think that's more than possible. I think that's very likely. And Wall Street knows that Bitcoin just a little bit higher brings the vast majority of these Bitcoin miners, especially Cleanspark, into profitability. And over the last 6 months or so, they have basically flipped from being profitable before the halving to being unprofitable because the halving cut rewards in half and Bitcoin pulled back. If Bitcoin stayed at 70,000 and above, these miners would have been profitable this whole time. However, Bitcoin pulled back all the way down to 49,000 in August, which basically, in my opinion, marked the bottom. I don't think we are going to revisit that, and it's getting more and more obvious the farther we go away from it. But that drawdown did bring all the Bitcoin miners back to unprofitability, made forward guidances bad. They saw dips in revenue, but this is that turnaround point. Once Bitcoin goes on that next breakout, goes on that next rally, all of these Bitcoin miners essentially are going to be profitable, and the excitement will draw back in. and the Bitcoin miners will go on to outperform Bitcoin again. And some of you might know, but some of these Bitcoin miners are still outperforming Bitcoin even with this hard drop that they experienced. Even with this 50% pullback for Cleanspark, it is still outperforming Bitcoin from the bear market low of $1.70-ish. This is still a 6x to Bitcoin's roughly 4x or so. And by the end, I expect Cleanspark to outperform Bitcoin at a 2-to-1 ratio. And when we were at max hype earlier in the cycle, Cleanspark did more than that. And at some points, Cleanspark will outperform Bitcoin at 3-to-1. All right, now let's get into Iren. They did release some information about their AI somewhat recently. Back on October 16, they talked about their AI, how it's going to grow. I'm not going to go over every little detail, but they are adding 1,080 NVIDIA H200s in Q4 of 2024, which is more than doubling their AI capacity. They also accelerated their timeline from October 2026 to April 2026 for their 1.4 gigawatt substation. And they secured another 800 acres of land, adding to their existing 500 acres, bringing their total land holding to over 1,300 acres. That is massive. And planning is underway for both Bitcoin mining and AI pathways, with indicative interest in hyperscalers and other interested parties. Might see some interested investors throwing some money Iren's way to help them expand even faster. And here's one thing I will say about Iren, you know, they sell the Bitcoin that they mine to fund their growth. So far that has been smart, so far that has been good, while Bitcoin has been overall kind of pulling back as of somewhat recently. But you know, the thing is I think the Bitcoin miners that hold their Bitcoin are going to outperform in some cases. That said, I still hold Iren. I still think it's going to do great this cycle, and I think it might be holding even after the cycle just to see how their AI does. But you know, there is something to be said about the Bitcoin miners that are hodling right now. Once Bitcoin goes on its next rally, I think some of those will outperform Iren. But at the same time, maybe Wall Street doesn't care. And what's more important is just seeing the miners continuing to grow, continuing to expand. That's maybe what they care about more. Seeing which miners are going to end up in the top spot in the end of all this. I think Iren will be among some of the ones in the top spot. Now looking at Iren, it was $1 at its lows. It is now $9. It has outperformed Bitcoin even with this dramatic pullback. It is still outperforming Bitcoin. Even with this 40-something% pullback, it has still outperformed Bitcoin from cycle bottom to top so far. And it's at a point where either Bitcoin's going to rally and we're going to head towards our resistance up here, probably want to take some profits along the way, or Bitcoin's going to pull back a bit more and we're going to come down and test either 7 or 8. I still see Iren, all these Bitcoin miners in my opinion, as a buy. I think this is still the time to be buying them. It is getting later and later in the cycle though, be aware of that. Don't expect necessarily a 10x from here. I wouldn't, but a 2x, maybe 3x, maybe a little more. I think that's somewhat reasonable to expect. And by the end of this cycle, I'll make a price prediction. I don't really like doing price predictions. I'd rather follow the cycle and follow the chart, but some of you like price predictions. I think Iren can easily reach $20 by the end of this cycle, perhaps more, but that's basically my expectation from it, at least a double from here still. And I think that's reasonable to expect, especially once we see quarter after quarter of profitability, see that these Bitcoin miners are being able to put cash away, pile in some cash, or add more Bitcoin to their balance sheets. I think some will make interesting strategies. Some will adopt a micro strategy where they acquire debt to just get Bitcoin outright. Some will acquire more debt to get Bitcoin miners. Some will obviously dilute. And in the end, we're still very early to this industry. This could be a hundreds of billion-dollar industry one day. A stock like Cleanspark or Iren could demand tens, even hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap one day. And it'll be fun to flip some of these by the end of the cycle, but it might be worth holding a little portion to see where they're at in a decade from now. But what say you about the Bitcoin miners? Do you plan on holding them after the end of the cycle, after where you think Bitcoin tops out at? Do you plan on holding them throughout crypto winter? Or do you want to sell everything and wait to reaccumulate? I do think there's some potential with the Bitcoin miners that are getting into AI. They might be able to hold on to their gains a little bit better, especially those that are getting deep into AI, that it's becoming a larger portion than the Bitcoin mining. I think at the very least, it'll be smart to take out your original investment and then let the rest ride with basically house money. You can't lose at that point, but at least securing what you originally invested, I think that's a smart way to go. After that point, there is basically zero risk. But let me know what your plans are for this cycle. Where do you plan on selling? Where do you plan on rebuying in next crypto winter? And you know, some people are asking me why I'm talking about the coming crypto winter, and my answer is it'll come up quicker than you expect. I'm just simply reminding you that you want to take some profits along the way. Don't make the mistake of holding on to everything, thinking that Bitcoin's going to go to these outrageous prices when you have the loudest people yelling saying Bitcoin's going to 500,000 to 1 million this cycle. Don't fall for it. I think that is not going to happen. And Bitcoin is volatile. These Bitcoin miners are volatile. There will be huge run-ups. There will also be fear, panic, and pain, and worry. You don't want to hold on during those days, unless it's a small percentage and just speculation on the AI, keeping them afloat, like I said. But thanks as always, guys. Let me know what your plans are. Are you thinking about crypto winter, or is it just something too far away to even consider? Thanks as always, and I'll see you next time.